Right, tomorrow, Nebraska and Michigan State add another layer to a really peculiar series of weird games going all the way back to the two games in 95 and 96. But since Nebraska's been in the Big Ten, weird things happen between Nebraska and Michigan State. What will happen tomorrow? It's time to talk to our good friend, somebody who is one of our favorites covering the Big Ten. He's done it for a while. Michigan State fans are very, very lucky from the Lansing State Journal. Graham Couch covers the Spartans. Good morning, Graham.
Good morning. Happy to be on with you again.
Let's just start here. Here it's become a topic. The line is 11.5. I don't know how much of a topic it is in East Lansing. Maybe from the standpoint, we feel a little disrespect, got a chip on our shoulder. The line, 11.5-point favorite for Nebraska. Both teams off a bye. You know what you saw the last time out. Feel right or feel wrong?
It feels a little high. It's just based on what I've seen from Nebraska and what I've seen from Michigan State. I would have thought it would be, 7.5, somewhere in that range. It does seem a little high just because, for all of Michigan State's flaws, and they may be exposed to greater depths than I realized this week. They do have some guys on offense who can really do it. And Nebraska's shown some weaknesses at the line of scrimmage and stopping the run and running the ball. So Nebraska's not shown itself to be this complete team, and Michigan State just faced what I think was probably a better team at USC and lost by 14.
Graham, obviously here we're in Omaha, so looking at this game, we look at it very Nebraska-centric, and we're very quick to point out the advantages that Nebraska may or may have, on the offensive and defensive end. But from your perspective, being in East Lansing, following Michigan State as closely as you follow them, you look at this matchup, do you think that there is a distinct advantage that Michigan State will have tomorrow against Nebraska?
It's a good question. I think one of the things that is compelling about this game is Nebraska's pass defense has been their strength defensively so far. Now, some of that's opponent based, so to what degree, but still, it's been pretty good. It seems.
Yeah.
And that's the area where Michigan State has guys, like real guys, like guys that are going to play on Sunday guys. So that's and MSU hasn't necessarily had didn't have any of those. They had Nick Marsh, but he was a true freshman last year, and Aiden Childs was a different quarterback, and they didn't have Omari Kelly, and they didn't have quite the speed in the passing game. And so one of the questions I have for MSU is, do you have the type of guys in the passing game that it doesn't matter the opponent?
Sure.
Because that's what it really takes to be a team that's successful and decent. I mean, you got to have other areas too, but you got to have difference makers where the opponent doesn't matter, where they're just a problem. And so I'm curious to see that. MSU's been better running the football this year. They're not. The offensive line is not, gonna maul anybody. But that's a definite improvement. So if that's a weakness for Nebraska and MSU's able to run the ball, I think their passing game will be there. So that's the area I think sort of most curious for me is MSU's passing game able to take advantage of any defense because of his personnel.
Hey, Graham, when Jonathan Smith was hired, and on the heels of the Mel Tucker experience, I think a lot of people around here, and I think in the Big Ten said that's a smart hire because he's somebody that is going to recruit and develop, and that reminds me of somebody that we have a lot of respect for in Mark D'Antonio, 8-8 through his first 16. What's the general vibe of Jonathan Smith right now in East Lansing?
It's mixed. A lot of wait and see. Some people are more out than in. And some of that is wins and losses. Some of it's personality related, wondering whether he's the fit or whether he's a Midwest guy enough or whether his mannerisms are demonstrative enough on the sidelines, really connecting with fans. And you start to connect when you win. So I think that's the first thing he's got to do. And the Michigan game later this month will be really important for him. Last year, he didn't seem to, and he sort of admitted it after, understand just what that rivalry is. He hadn't been in it, and how important it is to MSU fans, and just how venomous it was. I mean, he'd been part of Oregon State, and he said afterward, it was clear it was just different. There's more there's just more hatred and more. It's really
Mm.
But MSU, you have to meet MSU fans where they are in that rivalry. It's the thing D'Antonio did before he won big elsewhere. And so if you can do that, and last year they took a lead, they looked good, and then they were awful in the second half. Then there was a skirmish on the field, and they complained to the Big Ten about some stuff, and the Big Ten did nothing. And so MSU fans were not happy with the way he handled that or their performance. Mm-hmm. That game has to be handled differently for things to change in the way, and then they just need momentum. And that's the big part.
Hey, that's incredible insight, Graham. Gary and I have been very high in Aiden Childs dating back to the preseason. We actually nicknamed ourselves the Childs Hive because on the station we've just been very. I mean, if you saw last year, right? He didn't necessarily have the best year, and you can speak better to this than I can. But you saw it. Like there were the flashes, there was the athleticism, there was the arm. You mentioned it earlier. You know, he's a different quarterback now. Just what strides has he taken, and what steps have you seen him take from the beginning of the season to where we are now?
Well, a couple. I mean, one, he's got 9 touchdowns and 1 interception, and that was a very different scene last year on that front. Turnovers were a big problem. Part of it was he was trying to do too much, but he also just wasn't. You know, I think he's got a much better understanding of defenses, of going through progressions. He's done a better job of keeping his eyes up, not dropping his head and running at the first sign of trouble, which is a challenge for guys who have athleticism and can do that. And so that's been a big thing, and they've really worked with him on that in the off season. And I think he's gotten a lot better. And I think that's the area where, his picking and choosing when to run, and understanding that you don't need. I mean, the problem last year, the offensive line was horrible too. So. Yeah. You didn't have. Now this year, there's been some pass protection issues, and there've been a couple times where you've seen that affect him. But for the most part, he's made good reads and he's made good decisions on when to go. And I think he just looks like a guy who just played a lot more football. And that's with quarterbacks, that's often the name of the game. You're seeing it with Dylan Raiola, right? It's a guy as a freshman, he comes in, all this hype, and yet he's still a freshman trying to play quarterback in the Big Ten, and you just see the steps from year 1 to year 2.
Hey, but with defense, and you mentioned it earlier in a question from Matt, and it is, 40-plus points have been allowed against the 2 Power 4 opponents in Boston College and USC. It doesn't matter if it's Jonathan Smith or Mel Tucker, an interim coach or whatever. It seems like there hasn't been a consistent pass rush. There haven't been those lockdown defensive backs anymore, or at least of late, which we got used to. What is the fix for this defense where it's at right now under Joe Rossi?
They just need bigger, better personnel. Better personnel is it. I think. I think Rossi's a pretty good coordinator. He's got a decent track record. He had success at Minnesota, a couple top 10 defenses. Some of that was a little bit schedule based when he was in the Big Ten West, but still, probably would have been top 20 defenses if he'd been in the Big Ten East or something. It still would have been really good defenses at Minnesota, which has its own limitations to some degree. So, what they have on offense in the passing game, they just don't have on defense, right? And they're going to have to spend a little more, develop a little more, and prioritize that side of the ball. They don't have guys who strike fear into you and can blow up. Doesn't matter. The offensive linemen can get themselves in the backfield, and they just don't have those guys. So I don't even know how bad their defense is outside of that, because it just affects you everywhere. And I do think they have some good safeties. Some okay corners, couple decent linebackers. They're just it's one of those things. If you cannot get to the quarterback in football, everything else is a chore. Everything else can look bad. I'm not saying they're great everywhere else, but I think if they had guys who could get to the quarterback, the whole thing would be okay.
So following up on that, Nebraska coming off a loss against Michigan, and I say the name Jayshon Barham, and people in Nebraska have shivers down their spines because he absolutely blew up the Nebraska offensive line last week, or 2 weeks ago, rather. Kind of following, I think I know the answer to the question, but in your opinion, does a guy like Jordan Hall or maybe any of these other linebackers or DNs, do you think they have the ability to maybe take advantage of a weaker Nebraska offensive line, or what you've seen from MSU? Has that not been communicated to you?
Well, it won't look like it did against Michigan.
Sure.
Nebraska fans can rest easy on that. So they're coming off a bye. They know this is an issue. I would be very surprised if they aren't really trying some new things in terms of scheme to get there. So but the flip side of that is, there's if you send people, and there's a cost for that too. But I do think they will find a way to get home a time or two. The question for me is, beyond the one or two times they get there, it's can they make Raiola uncomfortable? Can they get in the backfield enough? Because if you don't, and there've been too many comfortable quarterbacks against them this year, it's just tough. I wouldn't bet on them to do it at this point, because they just got to show me. I mean, that said, they played their best game of the year last year, coming off the bye at home, but that was a home game against Iowa. So the staff has shown their ability to sort of, find a great moment or a great performance. But it's been such an issue at this point, and I just think it's clear at this point that they don't have enough difference makers up front that I would be surprised. Now, they've been okay stopping the run until last week, but so if they can make them one dimensional, maybe that helps. But I don't think they'll be. I don't think they've got to make them uncomfortable. This could be a long afternoon for them.
Graham, as always, we appreciate the conversation. Thank you, my friend.
Anytime. Take care, guys.
That's Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal.